Hey, y'all. Welcome to Cross Politic. It's good to be with you, Pastor Toby, Jack Knox. I'm the Water Boy. You got to stick around for the Ninth Amendment.
The next two segments are going to be
David Fowler, Ninth Amendment, took me to civics lessons.
It's like ninja civics.
I didn't know about the Ninth Amendment. And did you know it's more important than the 10th Amendment?
I don't know about that, but I think it is as important.
I feel like I just got stood up here on. Toby should have said, yeah, maybe. All right. Speaking of, Jeff Zucker stepped down from CEO at CNN.
Not Zuckerberg.
CEO. I said Jeff Zucker.
I know, yeah. I'm just letting people know, not Zuckerberg. There's another good Zucker in the world.
Yep. At CNN this past week for sleeping with a subordinate and not reporting that relationship.
What does he look like?
By that, it is by far, oh, yeah, that's good. Hey, I got a little, look, he's a hero at CNN, too. By that is by far not the whole story. And not really the reason why he left CNN. Jeff Zucker had an affair with Alison Gollust, okay? And everybody knew about that relationship. As it actually was reported, it went on, possibly for a decade.
Both of them were married, right?
Not anymore.
To other people.
Not anymore.
Yeah, but they're committing adultery? That's what I'm asking.
Well,
I think they were divorced.
The timeline hasn't been totally clear yet, but they know they've been around and with each other for a minute, all right?
I read that they rented apartments on top of one another.
They did.
The same apartment building.
They did.
With their spouses.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Correct. So, but we don't. Anyways, we digress. Now, while Zucker was sleeping with Alison Gollust, pay attention here, he was moving her up the pole, probably a stripper pole at this point, and eventually promoted her to executive vice president, passing up capable candidates who were not sleeping with Zucker. Okay, so that was happening. But here is where...
I'm glad I wasn't drinking when you said that.
But here's where the story gets worse. Alison Gollust was previously Andrew Cuomo's director of communication. And why the Cuomo brothers kind of zoomed, all the Zoom interviews, zoomed to fame in 2020.
The who brothers?
The Cuomo brothers.
Okay.
Only to flame out after Andrew Cuomo was ousted for allegedly fondling women on the job as governor.
Allegedly.
Can't do that. Allegedly. I said allegedly.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
And Chris was ousted for his performance as journalist, and I use that terminology, performance as journalist.
Very useful.
That's not alleged.
And covering for his brother as a journalist. Chris also apparently had sexual allegations against him, too. Allegedly.
Those are alleged as well.
Chris, after being fired, sued CNN, and now all the dirty laundry is being aired, which is really why Zucker is being fired.
That is also not alleged.
Follow this. That wasn't. Chris Cuomo was fired for being too friendly with his brother, but the whole time, Alison Gollust was encouraging Andrew Cuomo to come on his brother's weekly show. Okay? Remember, Andrew Cuomo received an international Emmy for masterful COVID-19 briefings in 2020. I can't.
An Emmy.
I didn't write that part. While he was sending, I didn't make it up either. While he was sending the elderly into nursing homes with COVID, he signed executive orders to require this, which totaled about 50% of the deaths in New York, and the COVID deaths in New York in 2020.
And nothing happened. Nothing's going to happen with
Nothing's going to happen. Yep. So he's sending COVID bombs back home. His brother's interviewing him on the...
And he's winning an Emmy.
And he's winning an Emmy, and he's fondling women through this whole process.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
But here's the big takeaway. God always breaks the knees of the proud. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful to see CNN kind of get the knees taken out from under them. CNN is full of liars and sexual deviants, and they believe they are the standard for real news? Really? They are the ones that are waging a battle against misinformation? Really? in this last year alone, one of CNN's producers was fired for pedophilia charges, seriously gross pedophilia charges. Chris Cuomo had allegations of sexual impropriety against him. Zucker went down for sexual improprieties. And while all this was going on, they were platforming Governor Andrew Cuomo as the best governor in the U.S. They were lying about ivermectin being horse paste. They ran the fake Trump-Russian collusion stories in the last 4 years. And think about this. Let's just boil down just these two little simple things here.
Okay, boil it down.
Ask CNN. Is ivermectin horse paste? What did Dr. Sanjay say it was?
Gupta?
He called it horse paste on Joe Rogan.
Right.
And Joe Rogan said, I can afford human medicine. Ask CNN this. Can a man get pregnant?
Oh, yeah, they know what the answer is.
There you go. It's over.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. God's going to judge. God judges everybody.
Yeah.
And there's two ways you get judged under God. Either you get judged in the blood of Jesus, covered in the blood of Jesus. Either you get judged in Christ, or you get judged in your own self. And CNN is full of liars, and this is why I'm grateful for what God's doing across politics. We really do need organizations that are full of light and full of truth and concern for God's word and concern on what it means to be light to the world.
You know, one of the things that we've forgotten is that the media, the news, is supposed to be a protection, an information source, a journalist for the people, for the free man, to protect them from the people in government.
That's what the First Amendment's all about.
Them, right? Yeah. That's why freedom of the press and freedom of speech is massively important. But when you come to, if you say that you got a house dog supposed to be protecting the chicken coop, right? And you come outside and he got feathers in his mouth.
That's right.
You got to shoot the dog, baby. You got to shoot the dog.
Yeah.
So I just open my Bible to
Amen.
Praise God.
Proverbs.
Do I need to get the organ out?
I don't know. I'm just going to read it. Proverbs 1. It's right at the very beginning, so you don't miss it. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, come with us, let us lay in wait for blood. Let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. And let's hunt them down. Let us swallow them up alive as the grave and whole as those that go down into the pit. We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, walk not thou in the way with them. Refrain thy foot from their path. Listen to this. For their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird.
That's right.
And they lay in wait for their own blood. They are lurking privily for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone that is greedy for gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof.
That's so good, Toby.
This is like a great case in point. You know, families, have this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're seeing as CNN is a Proverbs parable.
That's right.
That's right.
It's what are they after? They're after power, gain, sex, money.
And they're using
influence.
lies, pride.
Yeah. And they're doing it while hunting the lives of the innocent.
That's right.
Right? The lives of people, you know, they're trying to build their empires on the backs of innocent people. Slanders, lies, what happens?
And Proverbs, it's real death.
They're actually, when you do that, you read that sometimes and you think, that seems so extreme.
Who would do that?
Who would do that? Well, here you go.
CNN.
Case in point. And when they do that, and this is also encouragement just to Christians, when people are this audacious, just over the top, like read your book of Proverbs and recognize what they are actually hunting for is their own lives.
That's right. That's really good.
I don't have nothing to say to that.
Well, and I'll just say, in the end is death. And CNN never reported on Governor Cuomo sending all these executive orders, sending all these old people to homes.
That's what I'm talking about.
And they died.
Yeah,
50% of the deaths.
They're making. He's getting Emmys off of the
dead
murder. Essentially,
that's right.
The death sentence against all these elderly, our parents, our grandparents. The people we're supposed to honor and protect. And so who are they hunting? They're actually hunting their own lives.
They got feathers in their mouth. That's what they got.
That's right.
That's good, Knox.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, who is a pro-choice Democrat who doesn't believe that children in the mother's womb have the right to live. We should just stop there and say, what? Yeah. She's recently spoken at the Congressional Executive Commission on China February 4th, this past February 4th, because of the Winter Olympics that's going on, saying that the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party is attempting to use the glitz and glamour of the Winter Olympics to showcase a facade that distracts from global attention from the egregious human rights abuse that is happening right now in China.
The Chinese government once again attempt to distract the world from a decades-long campaign of abuse and repression. But the United States and the international community know the truth. The People's Republic of China is perpetrating a campaign of gross human rights violations, including genocide. Over the next 2 weeks, it is our urgent moral duty to shine a bright light on the many human rights violations being perpetrated by the host nation.
Genocide.
An urgent.
Steve Kerr couldn't even say that.
An urgent moral duty. Remember that. An urgent moral duty. Don't forget that.
Shine a bright light.
We are about to see just how urgent and how much of a moral duty it actually is. Pelosi has asked for no official presence of the United States or any other nation or representatives of a nation in China during the Winter Olympics.
Make no mistake, our athletes should participate. They've trained, they're disciplined, they've dreamed, they've aspired, they've worked hard. But this year, we must celebrate them from home as they compete in China.
We're going to celebrate you from home.
Right. So not only is she asking officially that we not be there in China during the Olympics, but this urgent moral matter that she seems to be very concerned about, she's asking our athletes that they need to share the same fear as the oppressed people in China.
I would say to our athletes, you're there to compete. Do not risk incurring the anger of the Chinese government because they are ruthless.
Just dribble your ball.
I know there is a temptation on the part of some to speak out while they are there. I respect that. But I also worry about what the Chinese government might do to their reputation.
Shine a bright light, but not too bright.
Yeah.
And if
This is the same thing with the mask. You know, just wear the mask. Don't
Just
speak out
shut
against
up
it. Just shut up and wear your mask.
And if we learn nothing else in 2021, above all things, in this urgent moral matter, don't forget urgent moral matter, Mama Pelosi wants you to remember to be safe.
It's hard to fathom how they could choose a country like China to host the Olympics, but they have, and we wish all of the athletes well. We wish them safety, and that safety includes don't for one moment believe anything the Chinese government might tell you about freedom of expression.
Or CNN.
You take a risk. Be safe.
In closing, read my lips.
If we do not speak out against human rights violations in China because of commercial interest, we lose all moral authority to speak out against human
For the
rights
unborn.
violations anywhere.
Wait.
Don't speak out. Speak out.
Right. So we have to shine a bright light on this moral atrocity, genocide.
Right.
We're cheering you on, but don't say anything while you're there.
Urgent moral matter.
Because, and then if we do not speak out,
we don't have any moral authority.
we don't have no moral authority. So compete over there, but have no moral authority.
Wear your
to do
mask.
so.
See, now you're becoming a Democrat. That's very good. I'm glad you understood that. What we've actually soon forgotten is masculine male leadership and how important it is. Remember President Ronald Reagan, he stood boldly in front of the Soviet soil, right in front of the Berlin Wall, right? And he this iconic symbol of that time.
Yeah.
And he said this.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Wow.
If that wasn't enough,
That's cojones.
Secret Service is tripping right now.
I know. They're sweating.
He's not done.
Oh, he's not done.
He's not done.
Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Wow.
He's not fleeing, not asking for representatives not to go. No, he's on the ground in front of the wall. Okay. When I saw this and I understood what was going on, I think Nancy Pelosi, where we currently are, what we used to be with Reagan, all I could think about was Steve Lawson.
Give us some men who know the truth. And who will declare the truth. And who will stand with Athanasius and Polycarp and Calvin and Luther and Whitfield and Edwards, and who will declare from the housetops that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation.
Wow.
We've lost man, and a certain type of man. This is a short clip, and then I'll be done. This is a short clip of Ronald Reagan, who was giving a speech, and out of nowhere a balloon pops. Watch this.
Openness and democracy that have marked the history of this city. America missed me.
Wow.
Didn't flinch.
No, play it again.
We'll play it again. Okay.
Don't miss this.
Openness and democracy that have marked the history of this city. America missed me.
Missed me. It sounded like a
Didn't
gun.
flinch.
It was a balloon. And he didn't even flinch and just said, missed me.
Missed me.
So here's
Wow.
Try again.
there is so much to this Nancy Pelosi thing.
Had he been shot before this?
I can't remember. I think so. This was why
That's even more ballsy.
That's probably why.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was after.
he had been already shot. But I would, me and Gabe were talking, and there's a lot that's wrong with Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
I mean, you got she's pro-abortion. She doesn't mind babies being killed in the womb. She's a person in the last year shut down the whole country and supported shutdowns.
Wearing masks and all
hypocrite
that.
because of it.
Yep,
Right?
uh-huh.
And then she's talking about. I mean, this is like what we just got done talking with CNN, right? This is hypocrisy. Guarding the hen house,
That's
the
right.
dog with the feathers in the mouth.
Yeah.
But then.
Yeah, Pelosi's got feathers in her mouth.
Yeah, exactly. But Gabe asked a good question. So then what do you do? What is your Ronald Reagan run right now if you had to go over
To China.
to
So
China
you're
with
an
the
athlete.
Winter Olympics?
What's your Ronald?
No.
We're not even that.
If you're a leader, if you're the leader, if you're Nancy
If you're the
Pelosi-
president. If you're the president. Yeah.
let's run as president.
Well, it's. I mean, I'm not the president, but
If you were.
but there's the thing. I mean, there's a pretty striking contrast here. Ronald Reagan makes that speech. Is that in Berlin?
Yeah, that was at the Berlin Wall.
Right
the
at
wall.
the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
He's there.
Yes,
Yeah.
he is.
In person.
Yep.
And he's going toe to toe with Gorbachev.
Yep.
Yeah.
And saying, "Tear this wall down. Open these gates."
Yeah.
Wow.
And so there's a contrast. Pelosi's here.
Yep.
And like, y'all go over there and compete. We're going to be over here. And I actually think it's pretty awful. She just said, basically, we don't trust the government. They might harm your families. And we're going to be over here with a laser light pointed in, what's his name's eye?
G.
We're going to shine a light in his eye.
Yeah.
Which is probably pretty annoying.
While you're there.
While you're there,
Yeah.
be careful what you say because it could harm your families. But we're going to be over here saying it's awful what they're doing over there while we're over here safely in our country.
I think that's the
That's spineless.
yeah.
It's cowardly. I mean, I'm grateful that she's saying that there's bad things happening over there. You've got Pastor Wang Yi is in prison for 9 years just for preaching the gospel, right? So, I think, starting, there has to be something with more. Here's the thing: leaders stand between their people
Come
and
on, you better
threats.
preach,
That's
man.
right.
You better
They
That
preach.
is
stand
right.
between
Man, you
people
better.
and their threats.
That's right.
What Pelosi's doing is just the opposite, sending the women and the children,
Yep.
effectively,
Yeah.
the vulnerable, over to where the threat is, and
That's
saying,
right.
"You go and be careful what you say over there, so they don't kill you."
Yeah, we'll start a fire over here while
And
you're over
we're
there.
going to be over here just stomping our feet around and saying they're really bad.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of masculine leadership.
That's exactly
it's the
right.
opposite of biblical leadership. A godly man is the one who stands between his people, the people that God's entrusted to him, and the threat.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means to be a husband. It's what it means to be a father. It's what it means to be a pastor. It's what it means to be a leader of any sort. Stand between your people and the threat. So I think, I understand that there were actually a number of objections to having the Olympics in China.
Yep.
I don't know. I didn't
For 20 years.
I
they've
didn't,
been-
I didn't follow the drama of it all. My guess is there's a lot of money involved, probably in the fact.
You mean
that,
like the NBA?
maybe. I don't know, but I think you got to figure out a way to get between your people. You got to stand with your people.
Yeah.
That's
right.
I get it. There are. Her point is true. There are people who've been training for their whole lives for this, and it's a big deal. But really, at the expense of the lives. They murder their babies in China. You got the Uyghurs, forced labor and rape and all the rest of it.
Yep.
You've got pastors like Wang Yi in prison, Christians
that's
in
right.
prison.
Don't forget.
For preaching the gospel. Here's the last thing I thought of, though, and this isn't really an answer to your question, but this is just another rabbit trail. It's just that, don't forget the fact that the United States and Canada is more like China than we've ever been in our lives.
Yeah. Which is why
That's right. We cancel. We silence. We arrest people
We
for
murder.
First Amendment rights.
We murder. We
kill
put people
babies.
in prison. Yeah, we kill babies.
We do population control.
There's also a sense in which I'm not sure. I don't think that Nancy Pelosi has any moral authority.
Right.
God is
she's been gone.
God. I think there was a time in which You were saying this earlier when we were talking before the show that there was a time in which I think there was a respect for the United States, a deep respect for the United States. And I think it was, and the thing that people don't understand is the basis for all true authority is moral authority.
Yeah, that's right.
It's because God's given it to you. It's because you have God's blessing on your house. But when you don't have God's blessing anymore, you might be the head of the house in name, in person, but you don't have moral authority anymore. If you're not following God, and then you're like trying to get people to obey God, they're like, why would we? Your actions speak louder than your words. And it's the same thing with America. America's lost its moral authority. We murder our babies. We say that dudes can be girls and dudes can have babies and all this nonsense. And the nations of the world know that's insanity. And people like Putin and Xi are, they're laughing. The Muslims are laughing at us. And because we don't have the blessing of God on our country anymore, that means that there is actually nothing stopping those kind of nations from taking us down. If you don't have God's blessing, you don't have defense. It doesn't matter how big your bombs are. It doesn't matter how big your guns are. Have you not read history?
Yeah, she's giving up that moral authority. Gabe had my brain spinning, and so I wrote down like 4 things I thought would be really important. I want to know what you think about this. If I was in some form of leadership, even Pelosi's position,
what would your Reagan move be for China?
It would be request bipartisan show up at the Olympics. Everybody. I want mayors there. I want everybody I can get. I want famous people there. I want as many people there, politicians there, because I want to make sure we get covered.
They know that we're standing there with you. That's a biblical principle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to tell my athletes, the second thing I would do is tell my athletes, win golds, speak bold.
That's right.
Win golds.
Every chance you have. They put a mic in front of your face.
You
say,
Jesus is Lord.
You say, Jesus is Lord. Release Pastor Wang Yi and quit messing with the Uyghurs.
We go Athanasius Contra Mundum, baby.
Free Hong Kong.
That's great.
We going all the way in.
I'm with you.
And then the third thing I would do, I have 4 things. So invite every journalist, small and large, that I can get my hands on here in America.
YouTubers, whatever.
But 3 is setting up number 4, because number 4 is my ace in the hole. I want all the journalists, small YouTubers. I want you, all of the American governments coming there with you. You guys show up.
Shine that light.
For the purpose of my 4th ace in the hole, I would contact every Bible-believing church that I could and request that they focus all of their missions. I would ask the SBC, I would ask the Presbyterian, I would say focus all your missions for this short time in Beijing
sharing the gospel
there. And what I'm going to do
street preach. Get Keith Darrell out there.
I'm going to make sure that my journalists are the ones filming everything you do and everywhere you go and documenting the whole thing, so that God has given us the opportunity to get inside of Canaan and take out these giants, and you're fleeing?
That's good.
No, we
That's
run
good,
in
Knox.
there
That's
and
really
we just blast this joker clean off its hinges. Anyway,
you want the Olympics?
Yeah, we can take
Bring you some Olympics.
Rent a building while you're there and hold a church service. Sing some songs
and encourage all the Bible-believing Christians in China to show up.
Yes.
That's right.
I mean, there's so many Christians in China.
You want to for 1 weekend get rid of underground church?
Just have them all out.
We're coming to town because you invited us. And we're gonna be worshiping Jesus while we fight and while we seek to win the gold.
Amen.
We got the eye of the world. If Paul saw this moment, to preach the gospel,
you mean you're inviting us in?
You couldn't come in for a couple weeks.
Right.
That is right.
That's good, Knox.
We're not gonna take this.
Where's your organ? Right here. Come on. Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, man, that's our opportunity.
That's good. Yeah, don't miss that opportunity. Using a smartphone or computer opens the door to a host of digital temptations.
Moral authority.
Yeah. In a world saturated with pornography and other harmful content, what's a Christian to do? We need to take a proactive approach, welcoming transparency in our digital media choices and accountable to you. The number 2, the word you, makes that easy. Their accountability software shares detailed activity reports from all your devices and your kids' devices in real time to the accountability partners that you choose. With accountability in place, your family can effectively guard against temptations online and live with purity and integrity. That's the moral authority we're talking about.
Amen.
You want to lead your family well, make sure that you're walking faithfully in purity. Amen. Learn more and try it free at accountable, the number 2, the word you.com/FLF.
You guys don't want to miss this next segment.
Ready to go to civic school?
For real. Recovering the Constitution using the 9th Amendment to restore civil liberty. This is going to be...
Quick quiz. What's the 9th Amendment?
Yeah, you might want to look it up on Google.
Be ready.
You won't find information like this anywhere else. David Fowler is going to be up to talk about his new book next on Cross Politics. I'm ready to go to school.
You ready?
I am. I got my pad and everything.
You gonna take notes? Welcome back to Cross Politic on the one and only Fight Laugh Feast Network. Not so long ago, the American dream was alive and well. Remember those days?
I do. Yeah, just yesterday.
Employees who worked hard were rewarded, and employers looked for people who could, get this, do the job, not for people who had the right political views. Redballoon.work, www.redballoon.work/FLF, even better, is a job site designed to get us back to what made American businesses successful. Free speech, hard work, and having fun. Is that really was having fun? If you are a free speech employer who wants to hire employees who focus on their work and not identity politics, then post a job on redballoon.work. If you are an employee who's being censored at work or is being forced to comply with the current zeitgeist, post your resume on redballoon.work.
Get out of there.
And look for a new job. www.redballoon.work/FLF, the job site where free speech is still alive. That's www.redballoon.work/FLF.
Man, it's a shame that we even have to have an organization like this, but we do. We're here. This is where we're at.
Want to work for someone who believes in math? Go to
redballoon.work/FLF. Don't forget
believes
the
the sky is blue
And there's biological men and women.
gravity exists.
Wow.
Hey, we are very grateful to have with us today Mr. David Fowler, president of FACT, Family Action Council of Tennessee. Following law school, Mr. Fowler practiced law in Cincinnati and Chattanooga. And in 1994, he successfully ran for the Tennessee State Senate, where he served for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Watch out, guys. He's like a...
Wow.
He's a ninja.
Yeah. For 4 years, he also directed the Center for Law and Government at Bryan College, teaching classes in political philosophy and jurisprudence. After leaving office in 2006, Mr. Fowler worked with leaders from across the state to form the Family Action Council of Tennessee, that's FACT, to protect the interests of families with respect to state policy and to educate the public about the importance of a family-friendly culture. He is the author of the books, The Politics of Loving God, Courageous Truths for Contentious Times, and
Loving God's political?
oh yes, just hold on, Gabe. Also, recovering the Constitution using the 9th Amendment to restore civil liberty, and he just told us a moment ago that his latest book is called The Naked Court, that may be rated PG-13. But it's available on Amazon.
And it's about
Check
the
it out.
Supreme Court. All
Yeah,
right.
it is. It is.
Naked
David, thank you for joining us on Cross Politic.
Hey, it's great. And listen, I thought Ziegheiss got fired from CNN the other day.
Zucker did. Zucker.
Oh, he said red balloon, and if you're tired of Ziegheiss, and I thought they fired him.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, that was subtle bad humor.
They had to close down the whole company to stop that. But
So in other words, to extend your ad, Red Balloon is not an executive search firm for some of the big mainstream media, right?
No,
that wouldn't work.
Zucker wouldn't get hired through Red Balloon.
You know, now, speaking of people getting hired and fired, I hear that you agree with President Biden. He said recently about looking for the United States Supreme Court replacement. He's looking for a candidate who has, in addition to being a black woman, a judicial philosophy that is more of one that suggests that there are unenumerated rights in the Constitution. All the amendments mean something, including the 9th Amendment. And you sent us something where you said you think you agree with him.
Yeah, actually, I do, sort of. But the devil believes in God, and so there is a sense in which the devil would agree with God. So yeah, I agree with Biden. The thing that caught my eye is, y'all know I've written this book about the Ninth Amendment, and I'm using it in our state legislative processes. I've used it in the United States Supreme Court in briefs, most recently on behalf of Coral Ridge Ministries and D. James Kennedy, who are suing the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the Ninth Amendment does say that we have more rights than those that were enumerated in the first 8 amendments.
Right.
The key, though, and where the difference comes and where Biden and I disagree, is that he wants a justice who will make up these unenumerated rights and use those unenumerated rights to then strike down and hold unconstitutional state legislation.
Right.
In fact, the Ninth Amendment could be a way around the reversal of Roe versus Wade.
Uh-huh.
When you think about it, Roe versus Wade was decided under the 14th Amendment as part of a woman's liberty under the Due Process Clause, which talks about life, liberty, and property. Well, let's assume in Dobbs they reverse and say the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with abortion. All you got to do is say, well, the Ninth Amendment has unenumerated rights, and one of the unenumerated rights is the right to abortion, and there we go, we have it again.
Right.
So explain that. It's obviously not what the founders meant by the Ninth Amendment. They were not trying to say, and whatever else you think up over the next few hundred years until you bring your civilization crashing down, feel free to just make it up as you go along. What did they mean by? So this, I actually just pulled out my Constitution.
I noticed you just had it right in your pocket, just like
I'm a pastor.
You don't have a tie on, but you got the Constitution
I got my Bible,
in your pocket.
and I got my Constitution. So it says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. What does that mean?
Well, that's a great question, and you don't really have to be a lawyer to understand it, although a lot of people, their eyes kind of glaze over. Oh, it's the Constitution. I'm not a lawyer. And I've asked them, I said, can you, I kind of made a little joke the other day. I said, can you name me at least 2 decidium Christialis that exist?
Oh, no.
And they said, I've never heard of it. And I said, well, I just need you to name 2. They said, well, I don't know what they are. And I said, right. You can't enumerate what doesn't exist. I was clearly trying to deceive you with my decidium Christialis. No such plant as that. So when you think about it, it's saying, okay, the enumeration of rights is implying that there was something that existed already, that we knew. You can't enumerate what doesn't exist, and you can't enumerate what you don't know exists. So even if it exists, if you don't know it, you can't enumerate it.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Okay.
So what is that outside standard? What are those enumerated rights that they're referring to?
Right. So, well, let me just finish the sentence there for just a moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
For Toby, because he's a preacher, and this is probably a little harder for him to get,
Whoa.
I'm going to drink some of this.
I'm sorry. You're my host. I should be not.
No, we love it. I like it. It's great.
Oh, you like it?
Just don't do that to me.
No. So it's referring to the fact that we've enumerated some, and that's the first 8.
Yeah.
And it says, but don't construe those, the fact that we've enumerated some, to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Now Biden took the word others, and he took the word enumerated, and he says we have other unenumerated rights. So actually, the words he used, other unenumerated rights, isn't in there. But the implication is that there are rights that aren't enumerated. And it says, though, they're retained by the people. Now, that's something Biden doesn't want to think about either. He wants them to be retained by federal judges and made up by federal judges.
That's right.
Not retained by people. And so what the founders were doing is they said, we've had a lot of conflict over the last several centuries over rights. Let's start out with King John and the barons and the Magna Carta.
Right.
And here are 8 of them. We want to make sure y'all don't forget over the next few hundred years. There's no establishment of religion. We're not going to let you do that, Congress. We're not going to let you inhibit the free exercise. We got freedom of the press. We got the right to bear arms. No self-incrimination. Right to a jury trial. No quartering soldiers in your home. Blah 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 blah. No excessive bails. Okay, eight rights. And they said, but listen, those are the biggies. We'll make sure you don't forget those. But that's not the exhaustive list. Mm-hmm. So the framework for that, now going to your next question, is, well, where do you find them? Now, what Biden wants is a judge that'll find them in his head somewhere.
Right. He wants the judge to define what those enumerated rights are that aren't listed in the Constitution that are retained by the people.
Right.
That's right. Okay. By essay, I will write down for you what these new ones are, which is essentially what a court opinion is.
Right.
Okay. And then we're going to use that to strike down some act of Congress, or most likely some act of a conservative state that, is like Idaho, and they're passing all kinds of crazy conservative things, and it's got to be violating some right, surely. Right. So, but the thought was, well, okay, these existed somewhere. You couldn't have enumerated them. So where would you go to find them? Well, the founders would have gone to what was called the common law.
How do you know that?
Well, in part because I went to law school, although I didn't really learn that in law school. But but the Supreme Court, most everything I know, I did not learn in law school. So,
that's scary.
It's kind of scary. I have a doctor of jurisprudence, but I didn't have a class in jurisprudence, so that's pretty good. Yeah, the professor was old and died, and they just didn't have one to offer for 3 years while I was there. So anyway,
that's funny.
But the common law is essentially what most all the states are, and the Supreme Court has said that the Constitution was framed in the nomenclature, these are their words, of the common law.
Okay.
Supreme Court has said, and these are post 14th Amendment cases. So this isn't like I'm going back to 1789 or something. Okay. These are 14th Amendment. And they said that the Constitution must be understood and necessarily interpreted in light of the common law and its history.
Okay.
So essentially what that would be the equivalent of for a theologian is learning modern day Greek and not learning ancient Greek. The text back then. Okay. It's the same thing as the evolution of the word gay in my lifetime. I used to sing this old male chorus song, "See that brother dressed so gay," and we weren't referring to a homosexual. We were referring to the style of his clothing.
Right.
So the Supreme Court has said this was the nomenclature, the common law. That's how it was written. If you want to understand what it means, you need to go back to the common law.
Okay.
Don't use today's modern interpretation of what liberty meant, or modern interpretations of what persons meant, or property meant, or the second offense means. All these words in the Constitution. The Supreme Court still, even to this day, this year, has gone back to the common law to say, what does this phrase in the Constitution mean? Now, Biden wants to jettison all that.
Yeah.
Because who wants a living Constitution tied to dead people?
Right.
See, the common law is tied to dead people like William Blackstone and Koch and Pufendorf and all these scholars over the centuries that helped develop the common law. And what the common law was essentially this. There's a dispute between two people. And it can be any kind of dispute, a property dispute. You're all of a sudden Chocolate Knox says, "Hey, you got your fence on my side of the yard."
I've seen that before.
Or on the back 40, I found you built a little hut back here, and this is not your property. And so you'd go to court, or you have a contract where, you're going to pay somebody to do some services. They do it, and then they don't pay. All that's common law. We operate according to the common law every day. Your restaurant transactions are common law. You don't have to go get a permit from the government to buy a hamburger.
Right.
And now they may have to get one to sell it, but and you see the fallaciousness of this with the little kids selling lemonade, on the sidewalk. Now the Department of Health comes in and all that.
Yeah.
But we operate under common law all the time. And what the court would say is, okay, we've got this dispute. So in the book, I give this example of the guy that goes into the restaurant and he realizes, whoa, this is way too high priced. I can't afford anything. I'm just going to have a bowl of soup and a glass of water. And they bring him a lobster dinner. 5 courses, the whole thing. And he said, hey, wait a minute, I didn't order this. And he gets up and leaves. He didn't get his soup. He didn't order. And so the restaurateur sues him. He says, hey, you came into my restaurant. And he said, but I didn't offer to buy a lobster dinner. I offered to buy a bowl of soup. Mm-hmm. And the judge would say, well, what's the right thing to do here? Did he steal something from the restaurant? No. Did the restaurant mean to give him the lobster dinner? Well, no. Well, if it was a contract, there was actually no agreement between the parties. And for a contract, there ought to be an agreement. So you don't have to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See, that's how the common law would operate. But behind the common law, this is what's so important for Christians to understand, was the belief that there was a God who had established a law pertaining to all things that he made, mm-hmm. and the relationship of all things to one another. So I would say, for instance, there's a law pertaining to rocks, just to keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Rocks are great for building roads and walls and bridges, but they're not very good to eat because that violates the God-given law of rockness, you know?
That's metaphysical. Like, what this metaphysical structure, what is it to do? Yeah.
Right. So, but he established a law for human beings. Okay. And then that law was for human beings was made such that it also worked in our interpersonal relationships. Okay. So he made us male, and then he said, okay, that's good, but I'm not going to make another male. I'm going to make a female. I'm going to make her from the male, so that there's this sense of the unity that is God in their ontological being of humans, but I'm going to make her distinct, which also reflects the Trinity. Mm-hmm. And so there's now a better picture of the image of God, of unity and diversity. We're both ontologically the same, but the male and the female are different persons, like the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And he says, and then we're going to join them together to create a unity of these distinctives in a social bond, as opposed to just a biological, ontological bond. Right. And now they're going to produce yet more distinctives. And we're going to unify those distinctives in a thing called family. And now I want you to fill the whole earth, because it's going to take a whole earth full of people to even begin to picture the fullness of the beauty of the image of God. And I'm going to need some bald-headed guys and some short guys and fat guys and really handsome guys. And
thank you.
You know, so there was that law, and so they then looked at the 10 Commandments. And they said, okay, we shouldn't be stealing, and we should honor our fathers and mothers. And so they in essence looked at life, and over time they began to work these things out using Scripture and the fact that there's a God who has created as sort of the plumb line to figure out what those rights were, to be able to distinguish between a gift and a contract. To distinguish between a trespass and an ownership of property. Okay. And so that was what the common law was. And it was said that when the judge issues an opinion and says, you don't have to pay for that lobster dinner, the judge was not telling you what the law was. He was telling you what he thought the law was. In other words, the judge's opinion was not the law. Right. Right. There was something behind the judge's opinion on which he based his decision. Yep. Okay. And a later judge could come along and say, oh, wait a minute though. Same situation as before, comes in, orders soup, water, gets a lobster dinner, but this guy, instead of leaving, he eats the whole lobster dinner. Mm-hmm. And then walks out and doesn't pay. And the restaurateur sues. And the belly full eater says, well, but the last case, he got the lobster dinner and didn't have to pay. And he said, yeah, but he didn't eat the lobster dinner. You ate it. So there's a difference here. And so it wasn't that judge was wrong. It's just that now we see the law changing to say that you can't order one thing and then accept the benefits of something and then not pay for it.
Right. Right. So, David, to help me here, you're arguing that common law was formulated over centuries of biblical precedent and kind of case law working its way out. And then you're saying when the Ninth Amendment refers to enumerated rights that aren't listed in the enumerated rights in the Constitution, you're saying they're referring to case law.
That's right. You're going back to say, what did the common law say were the rights that existed as of 1789 or whenever the Bill of Rights was adopted? Uh-huh. But think about the Old Testament. It was the same thing. All the case
law, right?
Yeah.
You had to compare he said if the cow breaks through the fence, but what about a goat that breaks through the fence? Well, I think it's the same thing. You know?
Right.
Okay. So
if you're borrowing your buddy's lawnmower and it breaks, it's on you. If you're renting your buddy's lawnmower and it breaks, the buddy has to pay for his lawnmower.
Because the rent paid for it.
The rent paid for it. So that's example of case law in Scripture too.
Right.
So that's what the judges were doing. But behind it all was the God who had established these principles.
Yeah. So it's connected to this is the idea of what I think you call them, and it's commonly referred to as, these are called pre-political rights.
Yeah.
And then contrast that with positive law.
Well, a positive law would say that you have a right to paratroop off of the Empire State Building if you get a permit for it. I mean, nobody has the right to go up to the top of the Empire State Building and just, I think I'm going to parachute off today, let's say. That'd be a positive right. It's declared, So we have, for instance, laws about freedom of speech, but you can't just speak anytime, anywhere you want to, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? I can get my bullhorn and go out in the middle of the neighborhood at 3 a.m. Yeah. So I don't have a right to go do that. Now, if I want to go stand in the street and talk to myself, that's great. Go ahead. But get a bullhorn and start yelling and playing music. Okay. If I'm going to have that kind of right, somebody needs to permit it, let's say. So a positive right would be one that is created by man. Okay. But now I'm going to throw a little tweak in here. The Supreme Court once used to believe, and they've said it, that even statutory law is based on the common law. And the purpose of the statutory law is to make more clear the common law and remedy any defects in the common law. Now, let me give you an example of that. I'm living here in Tennessee, and my family's all from Idaho, and that's where the family farm is. I get married here in Tennessee 40 years ago, and Dad's about to die, and he needs somebody to come back and take over the property, milk the cows, harvest the corn. And I go up there, and the next thing you know, my wife dies. Nobody much knows us, right? And somebody's got to inherit that property. So the question is, how do I prove I was married versus just living in sin with that woman? Mm-hmm. And who's going to get the property? Well, the minister that married us, he's dead, actually. He really is. I can't go get him to drag him up to Idaho and testify. And none of the people that were at my wedding are in Idaho. And so how am I going to prove all this? Mm-hmm. So states created statutes for licensing. This is what the Supreme Court actually said. In 1888, to provide a record of marriages and evidence of marriage. Because you can't wait for me to go find witnesses, drag them to Idaho, have a trial. By then, the cow's udders have burst and the corn's rotted in the field.
Yeah.
It's funny how we've perverted that law.
Yeah, now the Supreme Court says your statute was not correcting defects in the common law, because that's what the common law would have required. Bring in the family Bible. Bring in the minister, bring in some people who are there. Yeah. This is too much trouble in this modern society. People move around too much. I mean, everybody would have known that was old Sumter property because they've lived there for 50 generations, right? But now we're moving around and coming home and nobody knows us. They may have never met you. And so the states created these statutes. The Supreme Court in Obergefell in 2015 forgot all that. They forgot that the statutes are actually just trying to make clear the policy that already existed, that there is a thing called marriage.
Yeah.
To say you created marriage. As if we repealed the marriage license statute, marriage would be abolished. It'd be like, well, I don't even know what marriage is anymore. We don't have a license statute. I mean, can You picture that?
Yeah.
That's what most states do.
Right.
You can't get married without a license. So presumably, if positive law statutes are strictly creations out of the mind of a legislator, if they repeal the statute, marriage would go away. There wouldn't be any such thing.
Yeah. So the original idea of statutory law is to just make clear what common law already granted, what's already granted by God. So marriage is granted by God.
Right.
State didn't create marriage. They created a licensing program system in order to just identify these two people are actually married originally. But what they've done in jettisoning common law, now they're saying basically all there is statutory law. All there is positive law, meaning that's the only kind of law there is if man gives you something. And then if the licensing goes away, marriage has gone away.
And to say, yeah, exactly. And to say that we are the ones who grant you marriage. Right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
now-
We're God.
Yeah, we're God in this situation.
Yeah.
David, could you got time to stick around with us, do another segment? Because I have some more questions. I want to get back to, with understanding this, the foundations of where we're at, I don't think we understand what civil liberties are at all. And I kind of want to get back to the foundation. What are civil liberties that we have?
Well, and why is the Ninth Amendment, Ninth Amendment.
Wait a second.
Wait, Gabe.
Not taught.
Amendment.
Yeah. Not taught, and I want to know why is it so important?
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
To me, I think is more important than we realize.
Yeah. I'll be happy to stick around.
Okay, yeah. Wait, save it. We're gonna find out why it's not taught next. When David Fowler, go right now to Amazon. Recovering the Constitution using Ninth Amendment to restore civil liberty. There should be a bunch of books like this out there right now. The left is going to try and get it. You might as well get it first and understand what's going on. More Cross Politic coming up next.
Hi, I'm Robert Borton, CEO of Classical Conversations. Our most precious commodity is time. No one has ever lied on their deathbed wishing they had spent more time making money. They all wish they had spent more time creating a legacy. Our modern education system steals that legacy, steals that time from our children. That's why I'm passionate about homeschooling. That's why at Classical Conversations we want to give you more time to create that legacy, follow your passions, and glorify God. Visit classicalconversations.com for more information.
Man, I know David's trying to simplify things for me.
It still
seems a little heavy.
You know what, though?
Heavy.
It's all fitting together for me.
Uh-oh.
It's actually like, oh, that makes sense of this and that. But basically, the last segment was everybody's a theonomist. And we've forgotten that we've all been theonomists.
And everyone needs to baptize their babies.
And everybody needs to baptize their children because the covenant's true.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Welcome back to Cross Politic with the one and only David Fowler coming at us from Tennessee. And he's taking us to law school here right now. So, this is,
common law school.
What is the subtitle of that book?
Using the Ninth Amendment to restore civil liberty.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, so I almost call it. Is it okay to call you Doc Bishop?
Mr. Lawyer,
Mr.
whatever.
Esquire.
He's also a choir director.
Are you
really?
Oh, okay.
How about that?
You know what? This makes
like
sense.
hip hop or what?
Director.
This makes sense. The armies of the Lord always went out with the choir in front of them. This is starting to make sense.
So everyone knows about the 10th Amendment, but I don't think
anybody knows about the 10th Amendment.
When we first went on our conference last year, our Fight Laugh Feast conference last year in October, we got to sit down with David and George Grant and kind of talk about some of the stuff. And it was really the first time I was kind of introduced to like the Ninth Amendment. I'm serious. Yeah. I felt really ignorant about the Constitution. I know the first, I know the second, I know the third, I know the fourth, and then I know the fifth, and then I jump to the 10th.
I focus on the 5th, the 13th, and the 14th myself.
I
think most people do.
I don't think people know about the 10th.
David is dying over that one. Thank you, David.
I think some Southerners know about the 10th.
That's right. God's country.
But people don't know about it.
Jump in there, David.
Can I say something here about the 10th Amendment? This is interesting to me. Dr. Grant, when we had our podcast and the sound was kind of bad there, but he had said, you need to remember there was a preamble to the Bill of Rights. Most people don't know that.
That's right.
And the preamble stated the reason we're giving you these amendments, these that became the Bill of Rights, is because people were afraid that the powers of the federal government would be misconstrued, they'd be construed too broadly, and the next thing you know, everything be nationalized, and we'd all of our sense of liberty at the state level, civil liberties, you know. And so they said these amendments are being offered as further declaratory of the restrictions on the federal government. Okay, now he pointed that out. So the way I look at it is, if you'd say, okay, let's start. There's the introduction. What follows is to further clarify the restrictions that exist on the federal government. Number one, no religion, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. Get to number 8. Then number 9 says, and just in case you think this list of enumerated rights is all there are, federal government, there are more. There are more restrictions on you, federal government, than those first 8.
Wow.
But we're leaving those in the hands of the people. We ain't giving them to the federal government. Now, see, Biden wants to give them to a federal judge.
Right.
This is, we're leaving them there. The 10th Amendment then is the capstone that parallels the preamble that says, and by the way, the jurisdiction over these rights is reserved to the states or the people.
Wow.
So you see how they fit. Number 9 is saying, these are some of our rights. We have more rights. Jurisdiction to protect the rights is to the states and the people.
That is so helpful.
Wow.
I don't think
I'm looking at the preamble right now.
I haven't understood. Do you have it?
It's blowing my mind. Yeah.
Read it.
So the preamble, the convention of a number of states having at the time of their adoption the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, the further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. And as an extent, the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the benefits ends of its institution.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It was written to restrict.
David, can I just push back a little bit? Because I can hear it right now. My left, the end part of me, the little liberal part of me is yelling out, yeah, but that's the preamble. Preamble isn't law, David.
It explains. It's sort of like saying, well, we don't care what the Declaration of Independence says. Well, we do.
Mm-hmm.
We care. We print the preamble of the United States Constitution, too.
Right.
Now, some people like Nancy Pelosi want to say, oh, the preamble talks about the general welfare of the people, so we can just do everything. We can pass Obamacare because of the preamble.
Yeah, see, that's what I want to get to. So this is where it gets to civil liberties because, you know, when I opened up your book and I started going through it, I was expecting you to jump right to the 9th Amendment on chapter 1. You didn't do that. The first chapter is how the United States Supreme Court killed representative self-government.
Wow. Yeah, that's the same language for the naked court, that it's damnable.
Yeah.
Wow. And then
do you like the Supreme Court?
But then you start off and you start explaining that people don't have a concept of what civil liberties are. And so so could you really kind of go through civil liberties and define that for us?
Yeah. Of course, there's a sense in which we all have a liberty under God, right?
Yeah.
And but everybody's liberty runs into everybody else's liberty. So you have to have some kind of civil liberty as opposed to just all personal autonomy.
Covenant liberty.
We're not all godlets living in our own little universe, or if we are, our universes collide all the time. We have to have some way to have civil liberty. Now, the whole idea behind the common law was it was trying to develop civil liberty by saying, how do we deal with what God says people are, human beings are, and the nature of human relationships. And they said there are certain basic things about being human, that you have a right to, in the common law, personal security. Because God made us, I have a right to my life, my limbs, my body, my health, and my reputation. That encompasses who I am. I have a liberty to be myself. I have a liberty of movement. Okay, that was the real word liberty, which is distinguished from civil liberty. So when the 14th Amendment refers to life, it's referring to one aspect of the right of personal security, the life part.
Wow.
Not referring to the limbs, the body, the health, or the reputation. See, those rights would be among the other unenumerated rights. You see?
Yep.
All of a sudden you said, oh, well, it doesn't say anything about me taking a brick and bashing Knox over the head. We'd say, no, wait a minute. That's part of his body and his health and his limbs, and that's among the other unenumerated rights here. Hey, you can't do that. The state should pass a law to say, don't hit people with bricks. You know, that's bad. Okay. And then, of course,
You're a
property.
libertarian. You're giving me the libertarian argument right now.
Well, no, I got to put it in civil liberties context. I'm just saying. So I had a right to my body and all of that,
Yep.
and those are private rights. In other words, I have a right to not have Toby do those things to me. Not just the government can't do those things. He can't bash me in the head. It's not just the police can't bash me in the head. Toby can't bash me in the head. And so that right should be secured. And then the idea of interpersonal relationships, the common law said, well, there are three main economic kind of relationships that we found over the centuries are in the nature of things human beings do. One's master and servant. It's not a term we like today, but it's employment relationships, right? I'll do this work, you pay me something. So the second one that's fundamental to the nature of our being human is husband and wife. That's just what people do.
Right.
The third fundamental relationship, and interestingly, they call these economic relationships from the law standpoint, was parent and child.
Yes.
See, that goes back to the example in the last segment that we needed to know who is going to inherit the farm when I die.
That's right.
Okay. And who are the proper heirs? Was the wife my wife, or was she just, my lover buddy? And the kids, are they legitimate or bastards? What are they? Who gets the property? So those were the three rights. None of those rights are actually enumerated in the Constitution.
Right.
Now, the 14th Amendment, which Knox likes, right, says
Kinda.
that I can't take his life, his liberty, or his property without passing a law as to what is a wrong, okay, and then by a fair due process proving that Knox violated the law, and then I can take his property, his life, or his liberty and put him in jail, right? Okay, so that's how that worked. So if you think about the Ninth Amendment, the three fundamental rights at common law and the three fundamental relationships at common law are nowhere enumerated anywhere. Right. They are among the other rights retained by the people.
Wow.
Now, civil liberty, going to the point of Knox, is so how do we now interrelate to each other? And they're still taking this fundamental belief that God has established a law of human nature pertaining to our human nature and our human relationships, and they're working them out. So let me give you another little example of how this happened. We have child support laws, right? I can't just get my wife pregnant and then run off with my secretary once I get through law school, right? Well, somebody didn't sit down in the legislature and say, I don't know. I think it'd be a good idea if we made David pay some child support. Yeah, what do you think? Well, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, well, let's pass a law so that he doesn't do that. The common law would have said, well, that's already the law. The very nature of human relationships, when you enter into a marital relationship or you procreate, is that there are certain things that are true to that relationship. And Sonny, you need to pay for your kid.
Right.
It's covenant law.
Statute was codify. See what we were talking about last time?
Yeah.
The common law. And then when judges were all over the place about how much you had to pay and what percentages of income, the legislature said, let's correct the defect. In one part of Idaho, you're paying 10% with this judge, and the other judge, you're paying 20%. Let's just have a statute and everybody has to pay 5% of their income, but not less than this and not more than that. That's how it worked. So, Knox, what civil liberty means is not liberty to do whatever I please, an autonomous liberty, which is the way we think of it today.
Libertarianism. Yeah.
Yeah. It is, how do we have a civil society and have as much liberty within the confines of civil society as possible? And the founders did several things to affect that, to protect it. One is they said, we're not going to allow the executive and the legislative and the judicial branches to be merged in together or for one to take over the other. They're all going to be equal and independent. So when there's a dispute between me and Gabe over the property line, the court will decide that. And they're free to decide that. But then I'm free as a legislator to come along and say, well, if that's what the judge thinks, I'm going to pass a statute to change how we understand what property ownership is. And they were free to do that. Then we said, we're going to also delegate only certain powers to the federal government pertaining to our national sense of unity. And And we're going to have states that will be sovereign in their own rights as to everything else. So really, this is a beautiful, if any of y'all have ever read, what his name is, Rushdoony's book, The One and the Many.
Yeah.
Our founders, whether they were consciously doing it or not, saying, we need to mirror our government after the triune God. There is no foundation that's laid for anything other than what's laid in Jesus Christ, who reveals to us the triune nature of God, the unity and the distinctiveness. And so we're going to do that. We're going to separate powers. We're going to separate governments. We're going to have a national unity, but we're going to have 50, well, not 50 states. They didn't anticipate that. And that will protect liberty, you see, so that if, for example, New York had wanted to say that, well, we don't think a man and a woman can marry until they're both at least 18. That ought to be the common law rule of when are you competent to know what you're doing. But South Carolina could have said, we think that's fine at 15. And you see how that liberty would work?
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the case. That was the case with religion, even at the founding. I mean, is it correct that of the 13 original states, like I think 9 of them had established churches, and
denominations, denominations, basically.
State-funded churches in their states, and not that necessarily. I think that's a great idea, but nevertheless, it was allowed, even though the federal government wasn't allowed to establish a religion for the whole country.
That's right. Well, actually, in Tennessee, our Constitution was adopted, our current one, in 1870, which is after the Civil War.
Right.
After the adoption, okay? And ours says that you have a right to bear arms, except that the state may regulate arms, the bearing of arms, for the purpose of reducing crime.
Ooh. Yeah.
Now, I was asked when I was running as a legislator, what do you think about the federal right to bear arms? And I said, I think it's great. It's a federal right. But, the Tennessee Constitution, because I believe in federalism, actually says if the legislature thinks we got too many yahoos down here running around, they can do to prevent crime. Well, nobody liked that.
Yeah.
You see, what tends to happen, I hate to say this, is we want everything nationalized that we like.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't want anything nationalized we don't like.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you can stop talking right now, David. You can just shut your webcam off and go back to whatever you're doing right now.
Here's what I would say to that, Knox. Our problem is that our Supreme Court is the body nationalizing everything.
Yeah.
That's how they killed federal individual government.
That's how they created abortion. That's how they created same-sex marriage.
Right.
They say, here's a dispute, and rather than the states decide, what to do or amend the Constitution, we're just going to do it as judges. That destroys civil liberty.
Yeah.
Because no longer are we being represented by those that we've chosen to help make the laws to govern our interactions with one another.
So how does the 9th Amendment right now, how's it functioning in our country, and how is it protecting us? I don't think anybody knows about this amendment.
It's not functioning. I went back to my constitutional law book, and we never covered it. And in fact, the reason in part that we don't, here's the reason, is because the 9th Amendment, really, the only way it makes sense is to understand the common law and to believe in the common law. And the only way the common law makes sense, really, is if you believe that there's a law that precedes the announcement of the judge.
Right.
That's right.
And we don't believe in that anymore. So why would we teach an amendment that we really can't teach? It's like, why are we teaching the Bible now that we actually literally prove there's no God? Why are we still teaching this?
Yeah.
So if there's no transcendent law, which the Supreme Court said in 1938, there is no transcendent law. Well, that does away with common law. So the Supreme Court said in that same case in 1938, well, yeah, there's still common law, but it exists only by virtue of the authority of the state, and the only authority is the state.
Wow.
That's why I wrote the damnable book, or the naked book, to explain. We rejected all concepts of God in 1938, and when you do that, then this thought that there's an antecedent, precedent, pre-political law with enumerated, and unenumerated rights, it just doesn't make sense to the modern mind anymore.
Right.
So we don't teach it.
And never forget that when you banish God, you haven't actually banished God. You're actually you're
switching.
You're gunning for his
right.
job. Like
That's right.
you want to be God.
Yeah.
And when there is no transcendent God, then the state, and the state says, well, we're the ones making up the law. The state's saying we're God.
David,
That's right. So
go ahead.
what I actually said in the book, The Naked Court, is I said the Supreme Court endorsed polytheism.
Yeah.
There is no national transcendence. There's just the transcendent authority of the state, and there are 50 of them. So that's polytheism.
Right.
Okay, so David, here's what, after reading your article that you sent us and then going through the book, it seems now that while the Ninth Amendment has only seen maybe I think I read that the Supreme Court does not like to bring up the Ninth Amendment at all. They don't like it because no one really knows how to interpret it. And the ones who do are almost afraid to bring out, there's this common law. They know that's coming for them. But what I'm seeing now is that the left and the liberals have their eyes out on the Ninth Amendment in order to be able, at least what seems like what Joe Biden was doing, in order to be able to get a hold of this thing before anybody knows what it actually is, so they can twist it to work for them. So we got to, that's what it seems like is about to happen.
That's a wicked play.
Well, that's essentially what I said in the commentary. Whoever gets to the Ninth Amendment and defines it first wins for the next several generations.
Wow. You said several generations.
Yeah, because it'll take a while to, look how long we've been dealing with abortion for 48 years, right? Mm-hmm. And we're still not arguing. And I don't know if I know I didn't say this to you. I listened to the oral arguments. If you listen to the oral arguments in the Dobbs versus Jackson women's health case, not one time by any party did anybody even ask, who's a person under the 14th Amendment?
Oh.
Now, you would think with 6 justices who all refer to originalist, textualist interpretation, if the right to abortion comes out of the phrase, no person shall be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law, the first thing you'd want to make sure you knew is what a person is.
Yep.
That was never discussed, not even by the Christians. There were briefs by leading national Christian organizations. I won't mention their name because it should be embarrassing to them.
Wow.
Who said we should support the Mississippi law because we now know that babies can hiccup in the womb at certain ages and suck their thumb and feel pain. Now, my question to you would be, if you're that Christian organization, what principle interprets that data, those facts? Is it because they're human? That's why we don't kill them. But if we didn't know they were hiccuping and sucking their thumb, it'd be okay to kill them. So until they can suck their thumb and hiccup, we can kill the baby, right? That's the argument the Christian organization made.
Oh, David, you got to help me here because this is infuriating. How do we recover this? How do we, because when you see something this big, the first thing you want to do is it feels almost impossible, but that's just, when you see something like this, you got to say, well, praise God, we're getting this information, we're finding out that God has given us a weapon to fight with that we didn't even know about, right?
Right.
And so you don't just start wielding a weapon you don't know, you have to practice it. So what
legal battles maybe we could pick?
How can we pick the right battles, the simple battles, to start implementing the Ninth Amendment in some small areas so we can start seeing a huge snowball?
Well, for one, at least our organization was involved with 2 briefs using the Ninth Amendment in the Dobbs case that said, wait a minute, you've only looked at the 14th Amendment. The Ninth Amendment says there are other unenumerated rights that are retained by the people. One of the rights not enumerated is the right to life, and that belongs to all persons. So you've construed the 14th Amendment wrong. Okay, period.
Yeah.
Now, somebody found out about this argument, and D. James Kennedy, Coral Ridge Ministries, has sued the Southern Poverty Law Center and Amazon because they called them a hate group and they wouldn't put them on the websites and all that sort of stuff. So they sued, and they've been kicked out of court all along the way because of New York Times versus Sullivan. Y'all may have heard of that case, but it essentially says that the freedom of the press is so important. This is what the United States Supreme Court said in 1964. We have to have a robust press. And so unless you can prove, if you're a public figure, we need to know what's going on with our public figures. Unless you can prove that it was actually false and was done with malice. Now that's getting into somebody's head, right?
Yeah.
Then you can't recover for defamation or slander. Okay. Now, So D. James Kennedy, that ruling for public officials began to expand by the court to include public figures. So, for instance, y'all would probably be public figures today, given, the breadth of your audience and all this stuff and who knows you. So I could just say anything I wanted to about the fact that, y'all get together and do some unseemly things here and so on and so forth. And as long as I say, well, I didn't know it was false and I wasn't trying to hurt them because I was trying to actually help people know who they were listening to, well, y'all can't recover, right? Even though you lost all your jobs.
Yeah.
So the attorney for D. James Kennedy heard of this argument and called and said, could the Ninth Amendment apply here? I said, absolutely. Because part of the fundamental right, not enumerated, retained by the people, is to personal security, which includes your reputation.
Right.
So I filed a little short brief that says you cannot construe the enumerated right, freedom of the press, to deny or disparage the fact that we have other rights. And you just wiped out my ability to protect my reputation.
Yep.
That's wrong. You can't do that. And in fact, if we'd gone back and read Joseph Story, who wrote the first commentary on the Constitution, the youngest man ever appointed to the Supreme Court, the right-hand man for Chief Justice Marshall, we would have read that he said, of course, the freedom of speech is not the right to go out and slander people. But see, we don't ever go back and read the old stuff. We don't even think about the old stuff. We're not taught the old stuff. So I wrote that brief. So therefore, we're going to do it with marriage. In the next couple of weeks in Tennessee, we're going to propose that a man and a woman can marry without having to get the consent of the government. Now think about it. Each of you guys probably, went to somebody and said, can I marry your daughter? I mean, most likely. That's what we did.
I did.
Yes.
But the reality is she could say yes, your spouse. The parents could say yes. Your parents could love it. But hey, if you don't have a license, I don't care what you do in the church service, and I don't care how many of y'all agree, you're just not legally married. So actually, one of the partners to your marriage that you need to get the consent from is the government. And that's true in every state. So we're going to say, no, that's not true. And we're not going to make our ministers have to sign the government forms and bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's form of marriage.
Amen.
You bet, yes.
Amen.
You know,
Between yourselves, and your minister can charge you, solemn you, threaten you,
Yeah.
Toby, you start beating on your wife.
Yeah.
Me and the others, we're going to come see you. Okay.
That's right.
Now what you do is you go down to the courthouse and you file a record saying, me and my missus just got married last weekend. So instead of the government telling me I can marry, and then you have to sign all these government forms and your preacher has to sign them, and then you have to return them, we're going to say, no, we got married, thank you. We just want everybody else to know now we're married.
Yeah.
See, that goes back to the original Supreme Court case that said the statutes were created so people would know who's married, not to create marriage.
That's right.
So that's what I'm pushing in front of the Tennessee legislature.
So last thing, and then we got to go here. But how does this Ninth Amendment apply to abortion?
Well, my argument is simply that the right to life was retained. It's not an enumerated right, and all persons, meaning those whose life come from God, that's what the common law said. You're not a person because the statute got passed and said everybody gets a birth certificate. It's a person. No, I'm a person whether I got a birth certificate or not, right?
Yeah.
So the state of Tennessee is saying, well, that's among the unenumerated rights. It was retained by the people. Under the jurisdictional provision of the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment, my state can protect the life of all persons, and we're going to do that. I tried to get the legislature to pass it, and they wouldn't do it. Instead, we're worried about hiccuping and burping and moving around and feeling pain.
oh,
But
Wow.
that's how it applies. That's the brief we wrote.
And your goal here with this, I'm going to throw this out there, is we want to get every state, any state we possibly can, to have representatives willing to sponsor bills that would appeal to this common law on the basis of the Ninth Amendment in order to begin building precedent in this country.
Yes.
Of appealing to what we're talking about is God's law.
Or even recovering some precedent, not just building.
Exactly. But that's the goal here. What you're doing in Tennessee, we want to see done in every state. Presumably it's going to be we want conservative states that are willing to recognize the legitimacy of the common law, of God's law behind it all, in order to recover that That precedent, and your point here, overarching, is that a number of the leftists and progressives are beginning to eye the Ninth Amendment as a way of sort of establishing a precedent of
a leftist agenda,
purely positive law, purely human-made law. That the only kind of common law there is the kind that we've made up as a state, rather than appealing to God as the author of our common law. And so I'm so grateful for what you're doing there, David. And really and this is sort of a appeal to the whole audience out there. Get David's book, Recovering the Constitution. Get the book Naked Court. Read up on it. Send it to all your representatives and start asking them to appeal to establish law based on the Ninth Amendment, appealing to the common law.
I feel like I just went to civic school.
I feel like we just had a revival. I feel refreshed. And David, thank you so much for joining us, brother. Everybody needs to run the Ninth Amendment play, but first start by getting the book. And Dave, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you, man. If you're single, get married. If you're married, go have kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until next week, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Crust Politics.
We've been doing political rights from the get-go. You tell them every week.
Every week.
That's right. Hey, love God. Love your neighbor.
Claim your rights.
In Jesus'
I like covenant law.
American colleges have become more hostile to the faith of young Christians than the beaches of Normandy were to the Allies. Literally.
Undergraduate training wasn't always a death trap of unbelief. Once colleges were boot camps for body, mind, and soul.
Now, most college students spend their days in tax-funded adult daycares with all the intellectual rigor of lazy rivers, safe spaces, and complimentary condoms.
And in our recent COVID faux-apocalypse, those daycares became prisons almost overnight. Cover your face, line up for your shot, stay in your room, but don't worry, the condoms were still complimentary. At New St. Andrews, you are not on vacation, you are not in daycare, and you won't be herded into a dorm. From week one, you'll be treated like an adult.
You're responsible for paying your own rent and developing your own grocery budget. Or going hungry. Get a shot, or don't. Mask up, or don't. Most of our students even work part-time jobs on top of the 40-hour class workload. It's part of the anti-fragile hustle and grind that distinguishes our graduates from the majority of their own generation, and that employers and graduate schools love.
Most college graduates in the U.S. are stuck paying off loans for years. New St. Andrews sets you up to graduate debt-free and dangerous, ready to pursue grad school, a family, or business opportunities in the real world without any reliance on pork subsidies from Mother America and with no weeping need for safe spaces. The real world isn't a cushy place. No one owes you success. You are entitled to exactly jack squat in this life. But rich or poor, unlike your face or your freedom, your job or your business, an education and the ability to think clearly can never be taken from you as long as you are still above ground. Not by petty tyrants or cowardly clergy, not by thoughtless mobs or lab coat megalomaniacs. At New St. Andrews College, you'll learn from teachers whose ideas equipped men and women to build Western civilization in the first place, and which will be used again to defend and rebuild what has been lost as the West has faltered into decay, losing her faith and her mind.
Yes, most of our best teachers are dead. But our classical Christian liberal arts education is how we've been graduating thoughtful, articulate outlaws and leaders with spines for the last quarter century. The intellectual and theological bedrock beneath the Judeo-Christian West is what you'll study, engage with, write about, and own. It is what you will debate in class and present in public as you learn to live like forbidden fire, surrounded by the darkness of unbelief, manifesting God's truth, goodness, and beauty to all who live around you.
Training like this can't happen over Zoom. At New St. Andrews, we believe whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but a companion of real or virtual fools will suffer harm. Your peers shouldn't be your spiritual leaders. You should have a real flesh and blood in-person church for that.
NSA is in the heart of downtown Moscow, Idaho, where you will witness men and women building Christendom on every corner. Where else are you going to be able to break bread in your professors' homes, debate great literature with them while their kids are playing, sing psalms while being arrested with them, catch turtles with them?
No one comes to NSA to get lost in the crowd. You might be able to hide in a graduating class of thousands, but our classes are better measured in dozens. You will grow in this program or you will tap out. And when you finish, you'll be ready for life, in whatever moments and scenes and struggles God may have prepared for you. We are training students who worship and march and study and fellowship and sing and write and start businesses and raise kids that no one can mask, cancel, or bury. We follow the King of Kings who knew the way through the mob and out of the grave. We fight to rebuild Christendom in the ruins, in our families, and in our businesses, in the cities where we live, in the countries where we go, in the congregations where we worship. Your mom may worry that Moscow, Idaho is many miles from home. She should worry more about how spiritually distant even a nearby godless campus is.
After 4 years in a Christian community like ours, you will grow much closer to your family. Don't stay distant. Click the link today to schedule a visit to New St. Andrews College.